The Packers finished second in the NFC North at 9-7-1. They traded for Parsons before the season started, and the expectations were very, very high. But unfortunately, inconsistencies throughout the year and then Parsons going down led to them having a relatively underwhelming season that led them to winning less than 10 games. And in the first round of the playoffs, they ended up choking against the Chicago Bears, a division rival. And in my opinion, that choke job officially inserted Matt LaFleur into the hot seat. Unfortunately, Micah Parsons probably is going to miss a bit of time to start the 2026 season. So I will keep that in mind as I'm rebuilding this team. But if I'm being completely blunt, there were a lot more things wrong with this team than people care to admit. Yes, Micah Parsons' injury was brutal and it definitely tanked the season in terms of defensively. But honestly, the secondary itself was not very good to begin with. Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, and Nate Hobbs in particular were all disappointments. And in spite of the fact that you had great safety play from Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams, the corners were just not very good. And when you add to the fact that they weren't really getting a lot of sacks this year, which gave the corners a lot of pressure, it led to a defense that, yes, had the potential to be top 5, but ended up finishing outside of the top 10. As I already said, the pass rush did not sack the QB enough. Yes, you had Micah Parsons, and he had a phenomenal year in the games that he played, but Rashawn Gary, in my opinion, was not that good. Yes, he had 7 sacks, but it felt like he could have been way more productive given the other guy aside from him. And the interior of the pass rush was just a disappointment. I felt like Devontae Wyatt was solid, but not that good. And then Wooden on the other side of the defensive line really wasn't good either. The interior of this defensive line desperately needs an upgrade. And as for the offense, well, it was straight up disappointing. None of the wide receivers that we thought were going to break out, none of them broke out. Even though we expected Matthew Golden, the first wide receiver picked in the first round for the Green Bay Packers since the early 2000s, we thought he was going to be a big part of the offense. That ended up not happening. Their best threat, honestly, was probably Tucker Kraft, but then he got hurt towards the end of the season. The fact that Josh Jacobs, who I think is a top 10 running back in the entire league, finished with under 1,000 rushing yards is an absolute joke. And it speaks to another thing that I was going to discuss, and that's the fact that this offensive line really was disappointing as well. Elgton Jenkins fell off a cliff, and he was very productive just a couple of years prior, but he has gotten worse and worse as the years have gone by to the point where I think Elgton Jenkins is done. So I think that you're going to have to get a new center, and I'll get to that in just a second. But first, I want to talk about fixing up the defense first, because I think the defense in general, even though it collapsed a bit, it didn't collapse as bad as the offense did in the playoff game. I do think that there are things that need to be addressed in that defense, and that's the secondary. I think the secondary needs to be better in order for the Packers to even have a chance in the next couple of years. Now, the Packers unfortunately don't have a first round pick to get a young upstarting corner, to really get a guy that can come in and be a blue chip prospect. They're going to have to stick with the chips that they have. Now, granted, they could, in my mock draft, I do have them getting cornerback D'Angelo Pons. I'll throw up my mock draft right there. You could just go ahead and check that out. I actually have them getting 3 players in the secondary, the others being Jalen Kilgore and Jalen Catalon. I do think they need a primary corner. And the primary corner is going to be Jamel Dean. Jamel Dean has been really good for a pretty long time now. And I think the Green Bay Packers need that in their secondary. They need a top tier shutdown corner in their secondary heading into next year so that Valentine, Nixon, and Nate Hobbs, the pressure can be off of them. You got to realize these guys in the NFC North are facing cats like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, right? In Chicago, you're facing cats like Luther Burden and Rome Odunze. Look, the secondary that the Green Bay Packers have right now is not going to be able to sustain it. And given how the offensive lines of all the teams that I just mentioned are going to be good to great, I do think that you're going to need to have a great cornerback room in order to be successful in this division. So I think Jamel Dean should be a priority for the offseason, as well as drafting corner very, very profoundly in this upcoming draft, even though you don't have a first round pick. Shout out to Micah Parsons. Next, the defensive line also needs to be addressed. I think that it's safe to say that Devontae Wyatt needs help down there. And in terms of their rush defense, I felt like it was definitely a lot to be desired. It's safe to say. So how do I fix this? We're going to fix it through free agency. I genuinely believe if you're a contending team, the way to fix things best is through free agency. Get your pick of the litter and spend some money, especially when you're on the cusp of being really good, which I think Green Bay is on the cusp of being. So with that being said, I have the perfect guy that I think Green Bay should go after, and that is John Franklin Myers. John Franklin Myers just finished with 8 sacks, a part of a really, really good Denver Broncos defense. And on top of that, he can help stop the run. So you're getting the best of both worlds with John Franklin Myers, and you compare him with Devontae Wyatt. You missed Kenny Clark, but I don't think he's going to be as good as Kenny Clark was for Green Bay, but I do think that he's going to be much better than what you were throwing out there. I already mentioned Elton Jenkins being released. Well, Elton Jenkins is going to be released, and I have them getting Luke Fortner as their center. Luke Fortner, I expect to get a bit of a significant pay. I think the Green Bay Packers would overpay for a Luke Fortner. His market value right now is, I believe, at like $6 million. I think they're willing to go above that and bring Luke Fortner in legitimately. The rest of this offensive line is definitely interesting. It felt like this year they were playing Jordan Morgan out of position. Coming out of the draft, Jordan Morgan was a tackle. They keep putting him at guard. I expect Jordan Morgan, I would hope Jordan Morgan starts at tackle to replace Rasheed Walker, who is a free agent this year. Jordan Morgan should be the starting tackle next to Zach Tom. So I expect the offensive line to look like Jordan Morgan, Aaron Banks, Luke Fortner, Anthony Belton, and Zach Tom. That should be your starting offensive line. I'll pop up the mock draft once again just to point out Jonah Coleman, the running back out of Washington. I expect him to get a good amount of reps given the fact that, yes, they have Aaron Jones, but I don't think they're going to be bringing back Emmanuel Wilson. So I don't think Jonah Coleman is the exact running back that they're going to select. He's just in my mock draft because I needed them to draft a running back. But I do think in the draft that they will go with another running back to pair with Aaron Jones. Lastly, and this is the big thing, their wide receiving room, in my opinion, yes, it has experience, but it's also still relatively young. And I feel like it lacks a veteran deep threat in particular. Now, there are a good amount of veterans in the wide receiving room right now. You have guys like Mike Evans. You have guys like Keenan Allen. I don't think you need to get a really big wide receiver here. I don't. I think Christian Watson fills that hole relatively well, especially if you extend him. And I also think Matthew Golden is going to be a great playmaker next year if you utilize him correctly. So really all you need is a significant deep threat to help out the wide receiving room. And I think Brandon Cooks actually fits that very well. Now, Brandon Cooks hasn't been like this elite deep threat in recent years, but he's definitely somebody that can be, at the very least, a decoy for guys like Matthew Golden, for guys like Christian Watson to be productive. It honestly feels like there's just a lack of veteran presence in that wide receiving room in general. And I think that's why they really haven't gone and found that significant wide receiver one. There's nobody really in there to really mentor them. Any veteran wide receiver, in my opinion, helps. But I think Brandon Cooks makes the most sense. I think he's cheap and a guy that I think wants to win. And I think he can do that in Green Bay. The Packers are likely going to be contenders next year. Matt LaFleur is likely going to be on the hot seat if he doesn't get anything done this year. I thoroughly believe with the moves that I just made, you're getting the defense is going to be better. The wide receiving room is going to improve. The run game will be better. And I think the Packers have a chance to go out there and finally win a Super Bowl for the first time in over a decade and a half.
This has been Between the Uprights. Football is life. The rest is just details.